First take on this Friday Eve, and I am so hyped for today because we got some good playoff basketball. And look who's here. My friend's in the building. David Woody, so good to have you.
Feels good to be here.
Whole show, you're holding it down?
I'm holding it down, feeling clean, looking like new money.
You are. Max, do you think he can handle this? Is he ready for you 2 hours?
Yes, and the advantage of having Damian in Bristol is it's like you got both of us there in Bristol, Molly.
I got no comment for you. I got nothing. All right, guys, let's get right into it here. The Jazz snapped their 11-game losing streak in the conference semis by upsetting Max's pick to win it all, the Rockets 116-108, evening the series at 1 game apiece. Max, how concerning was this Houston loss for you?
I ain't that concerned. I know everyone, they see the way the Warriors are playing, and now you're looking at Houston, and now they lost a couple games in these playoffs, and what's going on with Houston? I'm not that concerned. They're not going to shoot that poorly from three. They rarely have an opponent shoot more threes and make more threes than they do throughout the course of the season, and only twice in the entire season, postseason and regular season, has any team outshot them by three by the margin, outshot them from three by the margin that Utah did last night. Now, look, there are some elements there, Damian, that the Rockets can improve on. There's too much ISO ball at the end. Not enough shots coming off of passes, and the stats back that up. Okay, I see that. D'Antoni, who has a tendency to really go with an overly short bench, had 6 guys playing 30 or more minutes last night, and so maybe that has something to do with the reason that they're missing shots late. Tired legs. He should probably extend that bench a little bit more. But James Harden ain't going to shoot like that again. Certainly not 3 more times like that in the best of 7. And as much as Gobert had to do with some of the problems offensively late for the Rockets, again, the Rockets had a lead in the middle of the 4th quarter and then missed shots at an unusually high pace. And when you dig into the numbers, our friends at Second Spectrum, Damian and Molly, you dig into the numbers, in fact, the Rockets' shot quality was higher than what they converted on. In other words, they were getting good shots. They just weren't making them. That's not going to happen 3 more times in a best of 7. I ain't concerned about the Rockets.
You might not be concerned, but I'm a little concerned with the Rockets, and a lot of it had to do with the energy that the Jazz came with. You just saw it, from whether it was Donovan Mitchell or Dante Exum coming off the bench. They presented a lot of energy. If you're the Rockets, you had to have known that coming off of the game that they had in game 1. But I thought what the Jazz did very well and what the Rockets do very well, the Jazz defended the perimeter very well. If you're going to beat the Rockets, the one thing you have to do, and you brought it up, Max, you basically have to force the Rockets to go ISO ball. Because guess what? ISO ball is not going to beat the Golden State Warriors. And that's what the Utah Jazz did last night. They shut down the perimeter. Yeah, they got some quality shots, but for the most part, they were active at the three-point line to shut down the three-point shot, making those guys, James Harden, Chris Paul, those guys drive to the rim where, guess what, Rudy Gobert is and where he's a dominant force. So that's something that the Rockets are going to have to adjust with. Yes, are they going to get shut down from three-point land like they did last night? I don't think that'll happen. But you got to give credit to the Utah Jazz for doing something that a lot of teams aren't able to do, which is play great perimeter defense, especially on the three-point line, and forcing the Rockets to play ISO ball, which is not going to cut it long-term in the playoffs.
Look, before this series started, I thought the Rockets would beat the Jazz in 5, probably 6 games, something like that, because the Jazz are really good. And they're getting better. They got better as the season went along. Into the playoffs, they've gotten to be better even than they were during the regular season. Gobert has a lot to do with that. With Kawhi's injury, it's who's the best defender in basketball? Is it Anthony Davis? Is it Rudy Gobert? Because he absolutely changes things defensively. Not only when you come into his zone, but he changes things for all the other defenders because they can play their man differently knowing that he's there to clean up the mess, should they be beaten. Should there be beaten, should the defender be beaten by the offensive player he's guarding? So, Gobert makes a big difference to the defense. Donovan Mitchell's been a revelation as a rookie, also even elevating his game under, in the pressure of the playoffs. But that said, I didn't expect Utah to go, quietly. They're going to win a game or 2, and that was one of them. But in fact, if a team beats Utah, let's say in 6, that indicates that the team that beat Utah is really, really good, like championship level good, which I think the Houston Rockets are. And so, you know, I know why people are saying I should. Max, the Rockets, you've been picking them since what, around the All-Star break? You got to be concerned now the way Golden State Warriors are looking. Maybe Golden State's learned from their experience with the Cavs a couple years ago that you put it on cruise control at times in the regular season to save yourself for these playoffs, and they've figured that out. And maybe the Rockets are where the Warriors were a couple years ago. You know, time will tell. But a Rockets team that has now lost, by my count, 5 games all season when healthy, including the playoffs. 5 times they've lost in an entire regular season and playoffs when healthy. You're now going to tell me that any team is going to beat them 4 out of 7? I got to see it to believe it.
Well, listen, do I think the Houston Rockets are going to advance in the series? I do, but Max, you would have to admit, the Jazz did what they were supposed to do. They stole a game in Houston. Now you go back into one of the most rowdiest, atmospheres in the NBA in Utah. So if you're the Houston Rockets, they've really never faced this type of situation before. And remember, when you talk about James Harden and Chris Paul, it's not like they have a stellar record, in the past when it comes to the postseason. So I want to see how they react going into a situation now it's 1-1, going into Utah in a tough environment. Let's see how these boys play to that type of environment.
Guys, real quick before we move on, can we just give Donovan Mitchell some props? How about that dunk? How good was that?
I mean, that's
Unreal.
second effort, really, because, the shot doesn't go in. He follows his own shot and stuffs it. I mean, this guy that's what you want to see. It's not just that it was spectacular. It shows you the intelligence and the effort that's putting in at that moment, asserting himself in that way.
So fun to watch.
Guys, the Jazz are for real. They're for real. But neither one of us think that they're actually going to beat the Rockets. And Rudy Gobert ain't on the Golden State Warriors.
No, of course. I just had to give him props for that. Mitchell became the 4th rookie to reach 200 points within his first 8 playoff games, joining Kareem, Wilt, and Elgin Baylor. Good company. We keep it rolling, fellas. The Cavs face the Raptors tonight at 6 Eastern on ESPN with a 1-0 series lead. LeBron James teams have a 21-0 series lead with a 2-0 lead. As for the Raptors, they've never won a series when trailing 2-0. Now, keep in mind, Kevin Love's elbow to DeMar DeRozan's face was upgraded to a flagrant 1, which in hindsight could have affected Game 1's outcome. Max, is this a must-win for the Raptors, your pick out of the East?
You ready for this? You mean you're asking me?
I'm asking
you. Is the second game at home to a team that seems to have a psychological whammy over them? Can they afford to lose the first 2 games against that team that's owned them in the playoffs in recent years? Can they afford to lose the first 2 home games to that nemesis? The answer is yes.
Get out of here.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's like a trick question, right? But no, actually, the answer is yes. The Raptors can even lose Game 2 and still win this series. In other words, is Game 2 must win for the Raptors? No, it's not. They can still win the series. I'm reminded of the Spurs a couple years ago, coming off that championship win against the Heat. That's one of the most beautiful teams anyone's ever seen. And then they're playing OKC the next year, and oh my God, the Spurs are amazing. Is this the greatest team ever? Or where does this rank among the great teams ever? And they beat OKC in the first 2 games and then get ran out the gym the next 4. It can happen, particularly with an older team. When they have to expend, even if they're playing the right brand of basketball, they have to work harder to achieve the same results. When you think about how lucky the Cavs were to even get that Game 1 win, if they somehow luck up and get a Game 2 win, they will have used up their luck. They're not going to get lucky twice more. And the Raptors are simply the better team. They're younger, they're fresher, they're deeper. They're better defensively. They're actually better offensively, too, and that's been consistent all year. So, no, as a matter of fact, the second game at home where they could go down 0-2 in a best-of-7 to the Cavs, who've owned them, is not a must-win for the Raptors.
Well, first of all, Max, the fact that you said that the Cavs lucked out and won Game 1 is just ridiculous. You're talking about a game in which LeBron James, even though he had a triple-double, didn't shoot particularly well from the field. So the fact that you didn't even get LeBron's best effort and you're still able to win, I don't know if I would call that luck. But to the bigger picture with the Toronto Raptors, in sports, we know that psychology plays a huge part in sports. And we know that the Toronto Raptors have been knocked out of the playoffs the last couple years by the Cleveland Cavaliers. When you're in a situation like Toronto right now, where the Cleveland Cavaliers have already accomplished what they needed to accomplish, which is steal one in the very first game of the series. And now you're talking in the back of your mind as an athlete with the Toronto Raptors, you're going to have thoughts, oh, here we go again. Because we've seen this movie or we've seen this script before the past couple years with the Toronto Raptors, where they ultimately fold to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So if you're the Cavaliers right now, you're playing with house money. Imagine how those guys feel right now going into this game, knowing that we've taken one game.
Yeah.
If we come out here and play free and play the type of ball that we played in game one and take this game going back to Cleveland, you can stick a fork in Toronto because they're done.
Max, let me just get in here for 1 second. They have the 1 seed. They're about to be done 0-2. This core group has been together a few years. How can you not say this is the biggest game in their franchise's playoffs?
It may be. It doesn't mean it's a must-win. In other words, they can lose it. It'll go 7 at that point, but I'll still take Toronto. I just think they're the better team. Even if they're down 0-2, even heading back to Cleveland, I think they're the better team. So you talk about the psychological whammy that the Cavs have over them. Okay, maybe it showed up in game one. It's possible. The Toronto Raptors have been there before. I actually think that makes them more experienced. They've revamped the offense. Guys like DeRozan taking threes actually spaces the floor differently for them offensively, even if he's still not great at always hitting them. But the threat of them shooting from the outside has changed the way they play offense. And you see it was a different team this season. They had the #1 seed. They were a top 5 offense and defense throughout most of the season. Most of the time, that's like a championship formula, actually. That's been the Raptors. And having been there before, and even having kind of collapsed, if you want to say, mentally in game one and barely lost, and now the Kevin Love information comes out, very well could have changed the outcome of the game, because not only do they get the extra free throw, they get the possession, too. And in a game that close, like, think about what happened in that game. Not only the things that I mentioned, but Toronto had to miss their last 11 shots, the last 11, to lose by 1 point in overtime. That flagrant not called against Kevin Love, and Van Vliet missing an open 3 that could have won the game. Like, and the little chip shots they could have had.
Yeah, and what do you
to win the game.
attribute that to, Max? Mental collapse?
Even if it is, think about that. It took that kind of mental collapse in a game where everything went wrong and they still probably should have won. It's just a better team than Cleveland, so I believe they can go down 0-2 and still win the series.
Well, Max, you talk about the Toronto Raptors being the #1 seed in the regular season. I think everyone around here knows that the playoffs and the regular season are two totally different stories. And for the Toronto Raptors being the #1 seed, last series, if the Washington Wizards had beaten the Toronto Raptors, I don't think anyone would have been shocked or surprised. In the Eastern Conference, being the number one seed is not really that big of a deal. I think all these teams are muddled together, except for the Cleveland Cavaliers, because they have one person over everyone, and that's LeBron James. I mean, think about this again, Max. I'm going to say it. The fact that LeBron, even though he had a triple-double, didn't even have his best game shooting in game one. That's going to be an issue for the Toronto Raptors, because the one thing that the Toronto Raptors don't have, they don't have an alpha that's going to take over a game at the end. Do they have a deeper bench than the Cleveland Cavaliers? Yes, they do. But we know at the end of games, when you need a shot, who are you going to go? Who's the guy?
I'm glad you brought that up.
DeMar DeRozan? DeMar DeRozan is not an alpha. He's not an alpha like a LeBron James or some of these other superstars that are in the NBA right now.
I'm glad you brought that up,
Now, I think that's going to be the main issue for the Toronto Raptors, is when things get tight, when things get close, they don't have a guy that's going to take over the game for the Raptors.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. You're right. They don't have any 5-star players. 5-star player, MVP. 4-star player, all-star. 3-star player, starter. 2-star player, rotation piece. 1-star player, G League replaceable guy. They don't have any 5-star guys. DeRozan's a 4-star guy. And, of course, the Cavs have the 5-star guy in LeBron James. But you know what? John Wall's better than a four-star guy, too. And were this another year, they would have lost to the Wizards. But I was confident the entire time they were going to beat the Wizards, even when as everyone started getting trendy. No, the Wizards are really going to beat them. Nope, this is a different Toronto team psychologically.
How?
The mentality of the because
how is it different, Max? Like, give me an example. Show me.
How? Opportunities.
Yeah, like you're talking about game. If they were different psychologically, it would have been a different outcome in game one. So what has shown you that all of a sudden this team is different?
They lost some games against the Wizards too. Here's what's different. While guys like you, Damian Woody, Super Bowl champ. How many NBA titles did you win? You know how many NBA titles I've won on the like EA Sports and stuff? Don't worry about it. Plenty. The point is, Damian, that it's not about hero ball at the end. In this era, more than others even, it's not about ISO ball at the end. It's not about, hey, my guy is so great that he can go get his bucket when you need him to. Now, does that help to have a guy who is elite at doing that in a way that DeRozan is not, although he's good? He's not, he's a four-star, not a five-star. Of course it helps if DeRozan was even better than he is. But what Toronto has learned this year is you don't just ISO DeRozan and Lowry at the end of games. In fact, when they did that in the regular season, and they've done it less in the playoffs than they did it in the regular season, sure, they still do it at times. It's natural in the NBA, I think, especially given the history of the league, that guys feel like the narrative is they're the protagonist of the story and they have to lead the team to victory through these individual heroics, right? But in fact, when they just continue to play the way they have all game, which is why usually they have a lead in the fourth quarter, and a lot of times a substantial one, when they just stay with that, they're successful. It overcomes the myth of the ISO ball hero. So while guys like you are calling for DeRozan to do that, they should actually do the opposite.
Hold on, Max. So you're telling me that having a LeBron James, a Kevin Durant, a James Harden, having those guys, I'm not even talking ISO ball, but guys who can create their own shot. Not only create their own shot, but maybe create their own shot for others. You don't think that's an asset, especially at this time of year?
Of course it is. And if DeRozan were even...
And that's what the Toronto Raptors are lacking. They don't have that.
What you're saying is Toronto could be even better if DeRozan was an even better player. That I agree with you, but there are trade-offs when you have a talented player like that, like, say, John Wall. Coach Fizdale was on our air talking about how in John Wall's absence, part of what the Wizards found is because he's so good at the high pick and roll, if they run it, it doesn't work, they get the rebound, they just run it again. And that doesn't help you like with the open three in the corner, right? There are trade-offs when you have a superstar hero like that. And what Toronto has going for them when they break free of that mentality is they don't look to do that. When they don't look to do that at the end of games, when they simply share the ball, they're very successful. And what I saw at the end of game one, even as they were missing shots, part of why they were missing shots is it wasn't yet automatic not to play hero ball. DeRozan would start and he would think, no, I'm going to kick it out. But that little hesitation was still there. I think that's out of their system. I think even if they drop a game two, the urgency will not be on DeRozan to do what you ask him to do, but instead to continue to play the team ball that puts Toronto in the position to win.
Max, I feel like you have delusional confidence right now, but I hope that I'm wrong. Listen, if they don't get out of this and win this series, I could see major changes happening to this roster. But we'll get into this more later, guys. When we come back, Eric Reid files a collusion grievance against the NFL. You don't want to miss what Damian has to say about that later in the show. And the Celtics look to put the process in an 0-2 hole, but Max will let you know why that isn't happening. After the break, First Take, keep it locked.
What are you talking about?